On Benedict Canyon Drive in 1959, Superman killed himself.
No. Took a kryptonite capsule.
More accurately, the actor who played the Man from Krypton in the 1950s TV show titled The Adventures of Superman, an actor named George Reeves, committed suicide. But to all the young fans of the show who adored the character, the death of the actor seemed like the same thing. It was quite a blow. Which I never really thought about before, but like being a kid in like the 50s.
How do you explain that?
Yeah. But I thought he could dodge bullets.
Not one. He could dodge bullets from other people.
George Reeves was born George Kiefer Brewer in Iowa in 1914. His parents were Helen Lasher and a druggist named Don Brewer. His parents divorced shortly after his birth, and his mother took George out of Iowa into Kentucky for a short period before landing in Pasadena, California, where his aunt lived. There she met
that little old lady
from Pasadena. It's Superman's mom.
That little old lady from Krypton.
There she met a vineyard owner named Frank Bessel, and she remarried, and he adopted a 3-year-old George. Bessel was a salesman for Bohemian Distributing and Alley Brewing, and in around 1939 apparently owned the North End Liquor Store in Manhattan Beach. Frank was a good father figure to George, taking on responsibilities of being the biological father, even though he was not. But George didn't know that. Around 1932...
Just like Superman.
Around 1932, Frank and Helen's marriage fell apart, and he moved on. Their separation occurred while George Bessel, which he took his adopted father's name.
They hired the right guy to play Superman.
Exactly. Their separation occurred while George was away with relatives. His mother would later tell George at the age of 18 that Frank had shot himself. I have no idea why she would tell him that. I've read different things about his mother, and...
Well, you can vote now.
I read different things about his mother, and some people have just claimed that she found it convenient to eliminate like both her husbands to save her social standing and to draw her son closer to her. Like she was very overpossessive of him. He, of course, was devastated. Around this time, he graduates from high school and enrolls at Pasadena Junior College. George was hoping to become a physician, but his low grades kept him from moving forward in that direction. He also considered becoming a boxer professionally because he had the build of a fighter. He was like 6'2". He was like a stocky
he had a
guy.
weird old strongman body.
Yeah, old strongman body, which it's not fat, it's not muscular.
It's not like the Rock, but it's not like Stan Laurel, Oliver Hardy, whichever's the fat one.
He's not like Fred Mertz.
I was gonna say Fred Mertz, but I didn't want to say that because I was then gonna reference him being in I Love Lucy.
Yeah, but
let's talk about butts.
His mother talked him out of doing boxing professionally, although he kept it up as a hobby. Mother knows best. George then became involved in...
Just ask Harry Houdini.
George then became involved in music and acting, joining an a cappella choir, playing guitar, performing in school plays. In 1935, when he was 21, he joined one of America's most prestigious theaters, the Pasadena Community Playhouse, which is, I didn't know it was that big, but it's world renowned apparently. And he started appearing in productions very quickly. Over the next 4 years, he appeared in like a dozen Playhouse productions. All this stage time got him noticed by a talent agent, and this led to one of the biggest roles in his life, 1939's Gone with the Wind. He plays one of the Goonie Tarleton twins that Scarlett fancies.
He did?
Yeah, he's one of those red hair goons. I've never seen it before, but I've seen parts of it and I had to see it. I've seen George Reeves' face enough times to be able to say, hey, George Reeves. And I saw him with the red hair. I'm like, that's not anyone I know. I don't know him.
Superman was a Confederate.
Doesn't it make sense a little bit, though? He gets a contract with Warner Brothers and changes his name to George Reeves. Reeves, I have no idea why. He also, around this time, gets hitched to a fellow actor from the Playhouse named Eleonora Needles. Things are starting to look up, sort of. He landed several follow-up roles.
Look up in the sky. It's a career.
It's TV.
It's depression.
It's lifelong depression. Oh.
Dun, 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 dun.
He landed several follow-up roles, but nothing was really putting George Reeves in anyone's mouth, you know? His best role, according to many, was in the 1943 film.
Don't make a joke like that after the John Holmes and all this.
All this Christian orgies. He was in a movie called So Proudly We Hail with Claude Colbert, but still wasn't catching. He wasn't getting that role. So now it's 1943, and one of the world wars is going on. Two? I can't keep track. Reeves serves a few years in the theatrical unit of the Army Air Corps. There he starts appearing in training films and stuff. So, while George was performing on Broadway in the Army's production of The Winged Victory, someone came to visit George Reeves. Now, this is where some of the facts kind of get fuzzy. Some say that his mother told George that Frank, his adopted father, had killed himself. And others say that she told George that his biological father, Don Brewer, had killed himself. I've read both before. Personally, I think it was Frank Bessel. Anyways, Frank Bessel, who George thought was dead, came to visit him on base. And George, who thought he was dead, was like, what are you doing here? And also at the same time...
Classic stage acting.
At the same time, he learned that Bessel wasn't his biological father.
Wow.
Same day. Either his original father came...
Which would shock you more? That I'm here?
But also, you shouldn't care that I'm here because I'm not your biological father. That or his biological father came and in finding out that, oh, you're not dead, but also that guy that was my real father is not my real father. One of those two things happened, but I think that the Frank guy showed up. Needless to say, he was psychologically rocked. After this, Reeves didn't speak much to his mother throughout much of the 40s, and at the end of that decade, 1949...
Silent era. Here's my impression of him talking to his mom. Bye-bye, mother.
At the end of the decade, 1949, he and his wife, Eleonora, get a divorce. She left him for another man, a show business attorney named Edward Rose. His career also, at that point, starts to slowly dwindle down thanks to his time away at the military. All this advanced stuff in movies means that he's not advancing with it. He then turned to the most degrading form of entertainment, television.
No.
Television.
What, Big with Ralph Cramden and the rest, and Beaver Cleaver.
Beaver Cleaver? Well, he's on Petticoat Junction. In 1951, he was cast in a pilot, some kiddie program called Superman and the Mole Men, based on the first superhero comic, which was a sensation. The pilot got pulled, and 26 segments were shot that year for 1952 for the TV show The Adventures of Superman, which, like the comic books, were an enormous hit. Every kids and adults loved Superman. It was Superman.
Isn't that so weird that these button-up middle-aged men in the 50s were enjoying these not cartoons but kids shows just as much as
kids,
as their dumb little kids were?
It's funny to me that they were pulling those EC horror comics away from children, but soldiers in World War II were we need more of those comics. Their days were shooting Nazis, and they're like, oh, you know what we need is a comic with a bunch of corpses in it. We'd really like that.
Something we can relate to.
So on the show, Reeves showed off his ability to play the strong, heroic type in Kal-El, aka Superman, and also the mousy square type with Clark Kent. Unfortunately, two
extremes of a man.
Either role he played made the actor miserable. He was dissatisfied with his career and felt uncomfortable making a living in what he called a union suit. And truly, as great as the role was, and to this day...
Is he talking about Superman's uniform?
Yeah, he's talking about... It's not a uniform.
That Teamster... uniform.
It's not a uniform.
His little...
cosplay.
Wardrobe. Yeah.
What is this? You dressed up in little tights.
America's greatest Teamster.
Yep. And as truly great as his role was, to this day, that's how we remember George Reeves. He couldn't really, obviously, move past it. He was typecast very quickly as the Man of Krypton. It certainly did not help that he made several personal appearances in character to children's hospitals, to TV events, on an episode of I Love Lucy.
To Little Ricky's birthday party.
Yeah, not as George Reeves. He came as Superman. Yeah. He was always Superman. Come 1953, George Reeves lands a part in the classic film From Here to Eternity. It's the movie where Deborah... Yeah. But you don't see him as much because...
He plays one of the kamikaze pilots. Or not the kamikaze pilots, or one of the planes.
He plays a plane. The studio had to cut several scenes out of George Reeves, apparently because during test screenings, the audience was laughing, shouting, "There's Superman!"
Like I just did.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds like an American audience, all right. Yeah, so they cut some scenes out because people couldn't handle seeing the actor who played. It happens to this day, really.
Yeah.
So at this point, he is completely distraught. In the 50s, he begins an on-again, off-again relationship with a married woman who is 10 years older named Toni Mannix. Her husband, unfortunately, is a man named Edgar Eddie Mannix, who is officially an MGM studio executive. And at some point, I can't really figure out when, he was the vice president of Lowell's Theater Incorporated. Unfortunately, Mannix was referred to as the Bulldog and was the right-hand man to Louis B. Mayer of MGM. More importantly, Eddie Mannix was a studio fixer.
Boy.
More on that later.
Those existed?
Yeah. It's 1959. Him and that woman he's having an affair with were not together, although he is currently living in a...
Did he like opera?
He was a fan of it. He was currently living in a home on Benedict Canyon that she had bought for him. 1579 Benedict Canyon Drive, a small, modest home, which is close to Clearview Drive, to give context. At the time, Reeves was engaged to yet another actress and socialite party girl, Lenore Lemon. The two were scheduled to get married on June 19th in Mexico. That didn't happen. Come the night of June 16th, 1959. Reeves and Lemon were in, and there was a house guest over named Robert Condon, who was working on a story about Reeves. Condon was staying in one of the 3 bedrooms downstairs. Reeves excused himself around midnight and went upstairs to his bedroom, leaving Lemon downstairs with Condon. Around 1 a.m, another couple, William Bliss and Carol Van Ronkel, dropped in for drinks. Lemon and Reeves, both being alcoholics, this was usual, but on this night, their late night irritated Reeves, who came downstairs in a bathrobe, and he shouted that he was in no mood for company and ordered them to leave. Bliss would tell the police later that Reeves was drunk, and the two of them got into this argument, which quickly they squashed the beef. Around 1:30, though, Reeves once again excused himself to go to bed, and Robert Condon, the house guest, says that Reeves seemed despondent, not suicidal necessarily, just bummed, cosmically bummed. Lemon later told police that as Reeves went upstairs...
Supremely sad.
Lemon later told police that Reeves went upstairs, and Lemon casually said to Bliss, "In a moment you will hear a gun." Ha ha, right?
Oh, funny.
Guess what? At that point...
You do great Foley work.
They heard a drawer open up from upstairs, and then Lemon, again, on this great sense of humor streak she was on, said, "And now you'll hear a shot." She, of course, was just playing around, trying to downplay this theatrics and up the mood. Reeves would frequently get drunk and play Russian roulette with himself, which is not how you play Russian roulette. But she never took it seriously. While Lemon was downstairs mocking her fiance's morose mood, a gunshot is heard. Bliss went upstairs and found Reeves lying on the bed.
Oh my God.
According to LA Coroner's report, Reeves had shot himself in the right temple just above the ear with a German Luger, which was found lying on the floor between his feet. The bullet passed through his head and lodged in the ceiling. There was no note. Superman had killed himself. Or did he?
Please say he didn't.
Police found 2 more bullets fired from the same gun in the bedroom floor under the rug, and one of the bullets had been lodged downstairs in the fireplace paneling. Lemon would tell police later that she had fired that bullet accidentally, which was not related to his death. It happened like a couple days before, but the other bullet, the third bullet, couldn't be explained. Many people have trouble believing that Reeves committed suicide. His mother, for one, had spoken to him earlier that day and reported that he seemed in high spirits. He was getting married in 3 days and had a honeymoon planned. He had appearances and gigs coming up. Career-wise, Reeves was scheduled to make appearances in Australia, which would have raked in $20,000 for him. The studio was planning on more Superman episodes, which again promised income. He didn't like it, but he was also planning a boxing match against a lightweight champion, Archie Moore. His actor pal Gig Young, who you may remember from the Walking Distance episode of Twilight Zone, he also plays the dance organizer from They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Himself, who met an absurd fate, said that Reeves was a clean guy, in no way capable of bumping himself off. Another actor friend, Alan Ladd, who had been in film noir flicks like The Blue Dahlia and The Glass Key, had commented that Reeves had never been happier in his life. Ladd himself overdosed on pills 5 years later. They believe that was a suicide. Hooray for Hollywood. Let's get back to Eddie Mannix, the MGM fixer. To do this, we have to go back to our second episode ever, the very first Creepy Christmas Haunted Hanukkah. Now, the most famous of the canyon incidents was covered in the episode. That's, again, Sharon Tate and her house full of guests get visited by the Manson goons.
They get bumped off, as some in Hollywood would put it.
Off of Benedict Canyon. She had a premonition of her death as well as her close friend Jay Sebring when the two of them lived off of Benedict Canyon on Eden Drive, the former home of Jean Harlow and her husband Paul Byrne. There in that home, Tate saw the ghost of Paul Byrne, or who she thought was Paul Byrne. Ghost, because Paul Byrne killed himself in that house. Or did he?
Please say he did.
There was a lot of speculation over whether his death was a suicide or a murder. The butler who found him called MGM studio execs before he reported to the police, and they had a few hours with the scene before the cops came. Apparently, and of course unsourced, Louis B. Mayer brought in the fixer, Eddie Mannix, to stage the scene to look like it was a suicide after another celebrity, possibly Jean Harlow or his first wife, had murdered him. That was in 1932. Imagine 24 years.
Jean Harlow murdered
Paul Byrne, and Eddie Mannix fixed the scene, and then 24 years later had to do it again. Some of Mannix's other duties include, which I have to read a book on this guy. I know that A Very Fantastic Podcast, you must remember this, did an episode on him, and I have to listen to that.
Not officially endorsed by this podcast.
He fixed a hit-and-run vehicular manslaughter committed by Clark Gable and had John Huston, director of the Maltese Falcon, take the blame. Huston was never charged due to a lack of evidence. Also, again, speculation, Gable sexually assaulted actress Loretta Young.
What?
Yeah, and when she became pregnant, he fixed it so she would adopt her own daughter instead of take on the scandal. This was
God, frankly, he does not give a damn.
This was a deathbed confession of Young's.
Confederate monster.
I've been saying that for years. Oh yeah, he was in Gone with the Wind. I didn't make that connection. Wow. He scraped up every copy of a porno film that was apparently starring Joan Crawford and destroyed them. That's just a few to name his job.
Do the police, do the LAPD have rights to that?
I want to see the subject of Mommy's Dearest. Get it on.
Open up the Disney vault.
When it comes to the night of Reeves' death, there's a rumor that Mannix ordered a hit on Reeves when he found out his wife was not only having an affair with him, but she had bought him a house. Other reports speculate that Toni Mannix, Eddie's wife, killed Reeves when she found out that he was going to get married to a much younger woman, so she came and killed Reeves.
What if both of them they reconciled their relationship?
Let's both kill there. Sometimes before his death, he reported that he was receiving something like 20 threatening phone calls from what he imagined was someone hired by Toni Mannix. Also strange is that Mannix herself had received the same type of phone calls, but you can't really believe that if she's the one behind it. There had also been 3 instances when someone was trying to run George Reeves off the road, almost killing him. Apparently, at one point, cutting his brakes from his car. He was looking at Tony the entire time like, I'm pretty sure you're doing this. A friend of Toni Mannix named Edward Losey, a Beverly Hills publicist, had commented that as her health was declining, she admitted to a priest that she and her husband both conspired to kill George Reeves, and they had thugs come in and kill Reeves. The obvious question, though, is how? How would this whacking or a hit take place in a house full of people? Other than Reeves, there were 3 other witnesses. You can't pay them off, and a secret can't last along between 3 people for that long, so it's kind of a weird thing. His almost widow, Lenore Lemon, spent the rest of her days in New York in a drunken stupor, and as one article put it, drank herself into alcoholic dementia.
God.
Tony Mannix for years kept his shaving utensils and lotions and even built an altar in her house dedicated to him with a crucifix and candles and a picture of Reeves. But did she need to go that far to remember him when she could just hang around that place where he died and wait?
Oh, no.
The people who lived in the Benedict Canyon house later were entertaining guests one evening when they began to hear noises coming from the upstairs bedroom, previously George Reeves' room.
Dun, 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 dun. What's that noise? Dun, 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 dun.
You won't believe some of the stuff they heard.
No.
Including the Superman theme song.
Shut up.
They heard it.
No.
There are claims that people heard.
But the Superman...
Not that song,
okay,
but the one from the show, which is not that far off, really. I heard like a weird version at work today because I couldn't raise the volume.
I went into a telephone booth and I listened to it. Really? That is so weird.
One night, the people who lived in the house after were entertaining guests, and they went to the room, and the room that was nice and tidy before was now a mess. It looked like it had been ransacked. When they returned downstairs, all the drinks they had been sipping on in the living room on the coffee table were now in the kitchen.
He likes to keep a clean house.
To keep it clean. That's why he got mad in the first place. Their German Shepherd was constantly barking threateningly, then cowering. One night, the dog was going crazy, and they opened up the door he was barking at, and the bed had moved from across the room. Not in front of them, but the bed was just in another spot.
It didn't like Pee-wee's Playhouse?
Betty! Some nights they were awakened by the sound of a gunshot in their home with no smoking gun.
Wow.
They also smelled gunshot, like gunpowder or whatever. Scent of a gun.
Vanilla. Scent of a gun.
Scent of a gun. The incident that caused one couple to move out was one summer evening at the witching hour, 3 a.m. They saw the ghost of George Reeves dressed as Superman appear in the living room, and they were out of there.
I would say that's cool, but no.
It's kind of not.
Not at 3 a.m.
No. What?
Can this wait until morning?
The investigation into Reeves' death has been depicted in the film Hollywoodland, which I hear is not very good, and the adventures of Eddie Mannix inspired Hail Caesar from the Coen brothers.
Really?
Yeah. The ghost of George Reeves has inspired people to look for other homes.